You know, for years we've been talking about the Illuminati, the push for a one-world government. We've talked about the Bilderbergs. We've talked about just what is going on behind the curtain. Up next, Daniel Estulin joins us again, back on Coast to Coast with two of his works, The True Story of the Bilderberg Group, which we've talked with him about in his brand new work, Shadow Masters. So get ready for something on Coast to Coast AM that will have you just shaking your head. And welcome back to Coast. Daniel Estulin is one of the brightest stars on the world stage of fearless, no-holds-barred investigative journalism. He's the only man in the world to have infiltrated super-secret Bilderberg annual meetings and accurately predicted future events based on what he heard. And next week, Daniel will make history, being the first investigative journalist in the world to give an address on the Bilderberg Group in the European Parliament in Brussels. Here he is on Coast to Coast. Daniel, how are you?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me. Good evening to America and good morning to the rest of the world in Spain.
Always good to have you back on the show, Daniel. You're always busy, aren't you?
Well, you know, the Bilderbergers certainly keep my hands full, and with my new book, The Shadow Masters, being released all over the world, yes, you could say that.
Tell me about this address to the Bilderberg, about the Bilderberg Group to the European Parliament. How did that come about?
Well, you know, about 8 months ago, Mario Borghezio, one of the senior European politicians in European Parliament, think of him as Jesse Helms of Europe. He had come across my book, the Italian edition of my Bilderberg book, and he actually didn't know that these people existed. This is a 50-something-year-old man who was one of the key politicians in Europe over the last 30 years, one of the key decision makers in the Italian government and European Parliament. And he had no idea that the Bilderberg Group, society, club, whatever you want to call it, that they actually existed. He was incensed. So with my Italian Bilderberg book in hand, he stood up in front of the European Parliament and asked who actually elected some of the individuals, such as Van Rompuy, the new president of the European Community, who elected these people, and if it was a coincidence that the same individuals who seem to be running Europe would also be part of the Bilderberg Group. Then when I came to Italy on my Italian book tour in November, he came to see me, and he asked me to join him for a presentation on Bilderberg Group in the European Parliament. I thought it was just, you know, speaking to the gallery, because this man, anywhere he goes, being so polemic, he's followed by a throng of Italian press. But actually, about 2 months later, this is the beginning of January 2010, I got a call from his secretary, and lo and behold, here we are next week, next Tuesday. I'll be speaking in front of the European Parliament at a historic event. I have no idea how many people will be there, but certainly I can tell you that Mario Borghezio will be there, and most likely Nigel Farage, the president of the British Independent Party, as well as a few other politicians from Italy and across Europe. Again, historic event. And Bilderberg, for the first time, has stopped being the domain of the conspiracy theorists and the freaks who follow the one-eyed, lizard people, that kind of order, and has become the talk of the mainstream, which is exactly what we've wanted to have it for the past 20 years, which is as long as I've been following these people around the world.
Tell me a little bit about the Bilderberg Group. Explain who they are, what it is, Daniel.
Well, Bilderberg isn't a secret society. There's no conspiracy, even though a lot of people would like to think of it as, as an evil eye conspiracy of some of the world's most powerful people. It's a medium of bringing together financial institutions, which are the world's most powerful and most predatory financial interests. And at this time, it is that combination which is the worst enemy of humanity. Now, the Bilderberg organization, historically, was founded through the French synarchist movement, which is a Freemasonic, Martinist, esoteric secret society. Now, the synarchist movement, in turn, was founded as the oligarchy's counterattack on the principles upon which the United States of America was founded. Now, the Bilderbergers' aim is to carry out bloodless revolutions inspired by the upper classes, aimed at producing a form of government by technicians and technocrats, under which home and foreign policy will be subordinated to international economy. What's interesting about these people is that actually who makes up the Bilderberg Group? It's the old NATO alliance. You're talking about the presidents of every European nation, Canada and the United States, although it's true that the sitting president of the United States never attends because every second of his time is very much accounted for. But again, he's well represented by others who represent the government. Then you have top 50, 60 CEOs of the leading corporations. You have the leading bankers, the United States Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, World Bank, International Monetary Fund. You have the congressmen and European commissioners. They're joined at this one long table by the leading lights of the world media, such as the New York Times, the Washington Post, Time Magazine, Wall Street Journal, Le Monde from France, Grupo Prisa from Spain. And finally, they're also at this big long table, there's always room for the European royalty, which is a very important part of the Bilderberger history. It's not just a decorative piece. The royalty is actually the key element, the cogs of the entire movement.
They've been there for a long, long time. Is it safe to say that this group is what we've always called the group that wants the New World Order?
Well, that's a good question. Actually, it's a bit of a misconception in a way that, Bilderberg, first of all, it's not a monolith, meaning that no group of people, I don't care how powerful they are, sit around a table holding hands, staring at a crystal ball, planning the world's domination. It's not so much about one world order, a new world government, especially a lot of people point to the George H.W. Bush's speech back in the 1990s as kind of the key phrase to this, towards this, government control. It's actually, it's a meeting of people who represent a certain ideology. And that ideology is rather one world company limited. It's the ideology of control by corporations at the expense of government. And this is exactly what George Ball said back in the 1968 Bilderberger meeting in Canada, when he said, how can we create the world where corporations one day shall give orders to governments? It's a very dynamic system, in that it changes with the times, absorbs and creates new parts while excreting the remains of the decaying parts, such as, Arthur Andersen, Enron. Members come and go, but the system itself, it has not changed. It is a self-perpetuating system, a virtual spider web of interlocked financial, political, economic, and industry interests with the Venetian ultramontane Fondi model at the center. Again, it's not about one world government, but rather one world company limited. And then, just all you need to do is just have a look at Greece today.
Sure.
You have the International Monetary Fund, you have the World Bank, you have the European Central Bank, which are not, the governmental institutions elected by the people, rather by the technocrats. They're actually telling, a supposed sovereign nation of Greece what they must do in order to get their house in order. This is just an idea. It gives you an example how it's not so much about the one world government, but rather one world company.
Why does it seem, Daniel, that countries like Russia, like Iran, maybe China, seem to be going not in tandem with the Bilderbergs, but opposite what they want? Why are they the rogues?
Well, because, that's actually a very good word, rogues. Anybody who is not with them is a rogue. Well, because these nations are actually not part of Bilderberg. The Bilderberg Alliance, this is your typical Anglo-American alliance of some of the most powerful, banking houses in the world. This is, what today's called the Bilderberg Group. Actually, 800 years ago already existed, and it was called the Venetian Black Nobility. I spent 2.5 years investigating the roots of Bilderbergers in Florence and Italy, and I can tell you there are documents, which is why I can prove it historically, which is why the New York Times of this world have left me alone, because they know they cannot discredit me.
Right.
What's today called Bilderberg, 800 years ago already existed. It was the old Venetian Black Nobility. And Venice being Venice, it has nothing to do with Russia. It has nothing to do with China. It has nothing to do with Iran, although it is true that there are an occasional Russian and even Chinese representative who attended Bilderberg back in 2004 in Italy. But these are rogue elements. These are, these are your typical fifth column. These are the individuals who are actually working against the interests of Russia nation state or China nation state, and again, against the interest and for the interest of the Bilderberger Club Alliance.
Do they create wars, Daniel?
Well, that's a very tricky question because, again, to believe that, a small group of individuals, control the world events as in, as if the rest of the world literally, plays to a tune of 2 or 3 people, such as the isolated intentions of a small group of people. It's a Cartesian fantasy world of primitive minds. Rather, what you're looking at is the dynamics of social processes that shape the course of history as the movement of evolving ideas and themes over successive generations. So, for example, what we're seeing today